Google's Chromecast, what might it offer Australians?
And gadget durability, how long should your tech actually last?
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner and I'm here with a man who's definitely out of warranty, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's happening in tech news?
Uber's launched its lower-cost ride-sharing service in selected Australian cities. It hasn't exactly been a smooth ride for the company though, with existing authorities pointing out that operating what essentially is a taxi service in an unlicensed manner could carry fines of up to $110,000 for the drivers involved.
A piracy crackdown is definitely on the cards in Australia as the federal government considers blocking file sharing websites and forcing ISPs to issue warnings to their customers. Google says that piracy is primarily an availability and pricing issue, but its advice has fallen on deaf ears.
The Commonwealth Bank has announced the latest update to its smartphone app will allow you to access money from an ATM without any kind of card. The way this works is that you set the amount that you want to send, up to $200 a day, and this generates two codes that can then be punched into the ATM so you can get hold of your cold, hard cash. Westpac has indicated that it's also going to follow through with a similar kind of scheme.
Hulu is also cracking down on unwelcome visitors, with the US streaming TV giant ramping up efforts to keep out foreigners. It's blocked access via several major VPN services, although browser plugins and DNS-based workarounds seem unaffected. So Alex, gadget makers do their best to convince us to upgrade every 12 months or even less, that your shiny gadget, your pride and joy, suddenly it's no good because there's a newer model coming along. How long do you think you're entitled to expect to get from a gadget these days?
Well, look, it is a bit of an open-ended question. It's a tough one to quantify because obviously it depends a little bit on the price of the gadget, whether or not you bought the premium one or the budget one, those kind of things. But at the same time, there's a very definite push towards this idea that, oh well, that thing you've got, it's a bit old, it's a bit naff, you probably need the new one. I was really kind of sparked into thinking about this recently at Samsung's TV launch for its 2014 range, where they busted out a stat that their research had popped up, and it stated that the average, and they didn't say if this was the mode or the median, and they didn't give the methodology out, so this could be a bit wobbly, but they stated the average age of an Australian TV set before it was replaced was only 5 years. Now, I don't know about you, but every TV I've ever bought has lasted a good deal longer than 5 years.
That stat sounds a little bit dodgy to me. They were throwing around that stat at CES as well. Not so long ago it was 7 years ago, and now they're saying 5. I kind of think they're hoping that people will start to look sideways at their 5-year-old television and go, oh well, I don't have to feel bad about replacing you because that's what everybody else does. But realistically, if you buy a good television, we're talking about good picture quality, you shouldn't need to replace it after 5 years. If you want things like smart TV and all that kind of stuff, use your set-top boxes. Don't buy a whole new television just to watch iView on it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, some of that can come down to that whole, is there a new feature in the new model? But at the same time, this push goes beyond TVs. Certainly, it's very, very prevalent in smartphones, for example, where tablets, generally there's at least one new model every year, and for certain manufacturers such as Samsung, there can be 5, 6, 10, 15, it seems, in a given year. But your phone contract, if you're on a contract, is 2 years. If you're buying it outright, generally speaking, the tax office wants you to write it off over 3 years. But a lot of smartphones don't in fact last 3 years, whether by misfortune or by simply wearing out. So it's a tough one to absolutely quantify, but it is something where I think a lot of people do end up getting pushed into this idea of, well, you must have the latest and greatest.
Yeah, but it's also a software thing as well. If you're still running a tablet or a smartphone that's 3 years old, it's going to start to feel a bit sluggish. Even with the latest software updates, they tend to be written for the latest and greatest processors with a hell of a lot of RAM. And so your old gadgets, which once felt really fast, can start to feel really sluggish after a couple of years.
Yeah, look, the software updates thing is a difficult one because, in a way, especially for tablets and for smartphones, it's about the only upgrade you can do. We've gone from a situation in IT where, if you had a desktop machine and the graphics card got a bit out of date and wouldn't do what you wanted it to do. Well, it was fine. You pulled it out, you put another one in, and yes, you paid for that, but you had an upgrade path, and as such, over the course of 5, 10, even 15 or 20 years, even if you were really keen, you could keep technically the same PC going, even though you'd replaced every part within it. You just can't do that with a smartphone. It's just not a thing that you can do.
Or put a bigger hard drive into your tablet.
Exactly. So the only thing you can do is take the software updates, and that's when they're offered. I mean, I know what you mean. It's particularly the case with a lot of Apple's devices. The new device comes out, the new version of iOS comes out, and hey, it runs like a dog on the old stuff.
Never install it on the old device straight away. Always wait for at least 1 or 2 updates before you put it on there.
But to give them a bit of credit, they're at least updating it. You buy an Android device and you might get a carrier upgrade. But my general advice with those is have a look at what it's doing right now, because that might be the only official update it ever gets. If you're keen on hacking, there are ways and means around that sometimes, but it depends on the device.
So what do you think? So what do you think in the end? What's the verdict here?
Well, look, I mean, I think it comes down to kind of sensible usage. Well, to throw the question back at you, what do you do with your old gadgets?
Smartphones tend to get handed down. The first one got handed down to my wife, and then when we got new ones, they got handed down to my kids, and they use them as music players. We've kind of reached this peak saturation now where when we do the next lot of smartphone upgrades, which will probably be at the end of this year, we're going to have more smartphones in the house than we know what to do with. And the ones we'll be looking to get rid of are the oldest ones. And so you've got to question whether or not that's actually worth inflicting that on a friend or a relative, whether it will run too slow. The same with tablets. We've got about all that we need now, but as soon as we buy another one, does anyone else want my iPad 1? Maybe not.
Yeah, and it is difficult if it's still something that's technically functioning, although technically functioning can be a bit different depending on the device. I've also got an iPad 1 which my kids use, and it's in perfect condition, like, no scratches, no dings, screen's fine, connector's fine, but the one thing that really is going on it is the internal battery, and that's going to be the case for anything with a lithium-ion battery because they degrade over the time whether or not you're using them or not. We'd also be interested actually to hear from you as to what you do with your gadgets. Do you send them to e-waste? Do you sell them? Do you hand them down? Do you just leave them in a drawer gathering dust? Send us in your comments because we'd really like to know. So Adam, it's long been rumoured that Google's tiny little Chromecast media player was going to come to Australia. Indeed, by the time you see this, based on some of the current rumours, it might have already been announced. What do you think the Chromecast can actually offer Australians?
Well, in the short term, I don't think they're going to sell bucket loads of them. There'll be the early adopters who have to have one of everything. And apart from that, I think the people who would appeal to the most are Android users who are secretly maybe a little bit jealous of the AirPlay ecosystem and how easily you can flick things.
Secretly is probably important there. I don't think they want to admit anything.
Very secretly. But if they've ever seen what you can do with an iPhone and an iPad and how easy it is to flick onto an Apple TV, you can do that from Android devices, but it can be a bit hit and miss. So the Chromecast is like the AirPlay solution that Android has been waiting for. So they're, I think, the obvious target. Beyond that, people like you and I, we've got a dozen other boxes in our lounge room that do this. It's not going to solve a problem, but I think in the long term, when the hardware is so cheap and so easy to use, that someone like your QuickFlix and Big Pond, who we both know are looking at these, might see this as a way to get into lounge rooms where someone owns a smartphone or they own a tablet, but they haven't gone the next step of buying any kind of streaming box for their lounge room. So $40, $50, whatever it is in Australia, stick one of these in the back of your TV and suddenly QuickFlix on your phone is on your TV. So I think that's the long-term play, is to bring up those extra people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is, you mentioned the early adopters. I suspect pretty much every early adopter who wants a Chromecast has parallel imported one
like we have.
By now. It's that's just gotten easier and easier as the months have gone by. So it starts to become that thing of, well, will it hit the mass market? And even in the mass market, I think there are a lot of choices out there that match and in some cases exceed what the Chromecast can do. I agree, it's kind of an easy thing in some ways once you wrap your head around what it's doing. There are some people who I think are going to look at it and go, so I've got to do something on my tablet, or I've got to switch my PC on in order to get this thing to then send that thing some kind of video. And it starts to fall almost into that fuzzy too hard basket, perhaps?
Yeah, but then you can look at it the other way. It's like, so you're telling me I've got to find the remote control and then I've got to go through the menus and I've got to turn this on and turn that on. Or I can just pick up my phone, open the QuickFlix app, hit the Chromecast button and bang, it's on my TV. So if you're already a smartphone or a tablet-y person, it is probably easier than fighting with a remote control. But like I said, it depends. You and I might not see it that way, but other people might.
Yeah, I guess so. And I suppose the other thing there is that kind of content play. Netflix is on the US ones, but it's blocked here. But as you said, QuickFlix are saying that, you know, when the Chromecast comes here, they definitely want to be on it. It's been rumoured that Big Pond are playing with it and might have something there, but obviously Telstra has actually got its own, you know, home media boxes.
And I've spoken to a few other local players off the record who are really keen on it as well. So there are definitely other Australian video services that have their eye on it.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to see. I don't think it's going to be a major device. But then the flip side of that is that the Apple TV itself has not been a major seller either. It's always been that kind of quiet little product in the corner of the Apple showroom.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a slow burn, I reckon. It's just slowly going to take off as new services come to it and as new people who discover it. Like I said, not people like you and I, but people until now have put the idea of streaming video onto their television in the too hard basket. I think eventually that's where it's going to go. And so we come to the end of another episode of Vertical Hold. I'm Adam Turner, and I can't wait for the Alex Kidman 2.0 to hit the shelves.
But I'm still in perfect working order.